Welcome everyone to today's chat, talking about the potential link between a US dollar crisis and a crypto boom. The big idea is that as the US dollar faces instability, cryptocurrencies could become a hot hedge against inflation, right?
Yep, exactly. It's fascinating how policy shifts, like the Fed's interest rate cuts recently, are stirring up some serious turbulence in the dollar's value.
Right. And there are wider geopolitical dynamics at play too. Global supply chain issues, skyrocketing US debt, and even the BRICS alliance pushing for de-dollarization. These factors create an
Definitely.
environment where, investors start looking for alternatives.
So, while traditionally people would grab gold or real estate, here we see Bitcoin and altcoins stepping in as potential weapons against inflation.
Exactly. It's like a shift from physical assets to digital assets. And yet, it's not a straightforward win for crypto either. Increased regulatory scrutiny is looming, which might put the brakes on an unchecked surge.
Right, regulations, yeah. That's an important point. The crypto boom could be short lived if regulators step in hard. But on the flip side, the persistent high retention rates in crypto adoption might keep investors in even as the dollar stabilizes.
True, true. Historical trends show us that once people get into crypto, they tend to stick around. Kind of like, think of it as once you jump on a roller coaster, you're going to ride it through all the twists and turns.
Exactly. And when we compare it to historical examples like the 1970s dollar collapse after the Nixon shock, we see dramatic declines in the dollar, but also a reversion to it over time.
Yeah, it's like we had that massive upheaval when the gold standard was abandoned. That change shook up global economics and led to some pretty wild inflation rates back then.
For sure. So, do you think that signals a permanent shift towards crypto, or is it more of a temporary hedge?
Well, it's a bit of both. While many see crypto as a hedge in times of dollar weakness, some argue that once the dollar stabilizes, traditional investments might regain their appeal. But then again, digital finance has its own momentum. Think about the retention we see on platforms like Coinbase.
Yeah, I've seen that data. Even during downturns, users seem to hold their crypto instead of cashing out completely. It's like they've become accustomed to the benefits of decentralized finance.
Exactly. And decentralized finance itself is a whole new realm. People can borrow, lend, and even engage in yield farming without the banks. The idea is that when traditional banks face turbulence, like in the midst of a dollar crisis, DeFi platforms could just blow
Right
up.
on. And speaking of benefits, what about stablecoins? I mean, many are pegged to the US dollar, but if the dollar's in crisis, wouldn't that undermine their appeal entirely?
That's a good point. Stablecoins tethered to the US dollar might lose their luster if the underlying currency dips. We could see a shift toward euro backed, yen backed, or even gold backed coins. It's like investors are looking for a more robust anchor in shaky waters.
Absolutely. I can imagine that national currencies, which are perceived as more stable or even commodity backed alternatives, might have the upper hand. But here's something I wonder, aren't we risking a scenario where the crypto market itself gets flooded with similar issues if everyone rushes in?
That's a fair critique. If too many stablecoins or even algorithmic variants like Frax or Olympus DAO gain traction without solid backing, we might replicate some aspects of traditional volatility. But then, even flat coins, designed to be inflation proof, could be a game changer. It's like diversifying a portfolio to hedge against multiple risks.
Yeah, quite a balancing act. And then there's the de dollarization movement by other nations like the BRICS members. It's interesting to see countries actively searching for alternatives to the greenback for global trade.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the dollar's not invincible. As global central banks diversify their reserves, holding more euros, yuan, even gold, the historical dominance of the US dollar might face a real test.
True, exactly. In that kind of scenario, crypto might not only serve as a hedge, but could also become a significant player on the global stage.
Definitely. But then also remember, if the dollar crisis is short lived, investors might eventually return to traditional fiat assets. The big question remains whether crypto's benefits, like lower fees, decentralization, and global accessibility, can override the lure of a rebounding dollar.
Right, that's the million-dollar question. There's also the issue of regulatory intervention. You mentioned that earlier. How do you see that playing out?
Well, if a crypto boom fueled by a dollar crisis triggers mass adoption, governments might step up regulatory measures to control the system. That could mean increased compliance burdens or restrictions on certain decentralized services. It's like having an unruly party suddenly regulated by security guards.
Yeah, that analogy fits. And that could, in turn, slow down the momentum of crypto adoption, right?
Exactly. Short term bullish sentiment might give way to longer term complications if the regulatory landscape tightens. But the retention rates in crypto tend to be high. Once you're in, you rarely
Pretty
step
much.
out.
Right. Especially given that major platforms like Coinbase report strong user retention even during market downturns. It suggests that the appeal of crypto might endure despite short lived instability in fiat currencies.
Indeed. And let's touch on an interesting historical parallel: the 1970s crisis. The collapse after the Nixon shock, while devastating at the time, eventually led to a recovery of the dollar. But the lessons learned from that period have also inspired alternative asset strategies, including crypto.
For sure, a historical lesson that still echoes today. Exactly. And while US dollar collateralized stablecoins might fall out of favor during a crisis, the emergence of alternatives like flat coins, which are tied to a basket of goods rather than a single currency, definitely adds a new dimension to the market.
Right, it's like a pivot, a sort of innovative reaction to an economic emergency. Investors might prefer stable options that track actual living expenses, which could, in theory, provide a buffer against runaway inflation.
Absolutely, that shift could be revolutionary. So, in summary, we're really looking at a multifaceted scenario, ranging from temporary crypto surges fueled by dollar weaknesses to longer term regulatory and market stability challenges. Correct?
Exactly. It's a complex interplay of monetary policy, investor behavior, and regulatory responses. While a dollar crisis could turbocharge crypto adoption in the short term, its effects over the long run remain uncertain.
Well said. And this raises the question, can crypto maturity eventually outstrip traditional finance, even if the dollar bounces back?
That's the fascinating part. Historically, once crypto users get a taste of decentralized finance and the freedom it offers, fast transactions, low fees, global access, they tend to stick around. It's like switching from a flip phone to a smartphone. You rarely go back.
Exactly, it's a one-way upgrade. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment. Could the inherent volatility of crypto, even with retention, deter mainstream investors if the dollar stabilizes?
That is a valid challenge. Volatility is a big concern, especially for risk averse investors. And, if the dollar regains its footing, they might prefer the predictability of traditional assets. It's a careful balance between innovation and stability.
Right. Exactly. It makes you wonder if the crypto boom during a crisis is simply opportunistic behavior rather than a sign of structural change.
True, though the data, like Gemini's reports showing over 70% of past investors ready to buy crypto again, suggests that once people taste the benefits, they might transition to a long term relationship with digital finance.
Yeah, that's compelling evidence. And then we have the decentralized lending platforms, which in 2024 alone saw over $60 billion in loans processed. That kind of activity is hard to ignore.
Right, it's a massive infusion of liquidity into DeFi, and it's building infrastructure that might be irreversible in its growth trajectory. Even if traditional markets recover, that infrastructure is here to stay.
Truly groundbreaking. Overall, it seems that a US dollar crisis could act as a catalyst, a trigger that fast tracks crypto adoption, at least in the near term, even if some investors eventually pivot back.
Exactly, it's like a temporary rocket boost that could leave lasting marks on the investment landscape. Even if the dollar regains strength, the momentum in crypto might very well persist.
For sure, it's a new era in finance. And in that transformation, We'll likely see a diverse mix of innovations, from euro or gold-backed stablecoins to entirely new constructs like flat coins designed to be inflation-proof.
Absolutely, it's a multi-pronged evolution. And as always, it's a reminder that global currency dynamics are fluid, and innovation often rises from the ashes of
Very true.
crisis.
So, whether the crypto boom outlasts the crisis or becomes just one chapter in the financial saga, it's clear that we're witnessing a pivotal moment in the world of finance.
Yeah, it's a thrilling time to watch these trends unfold. And it definitely keeps us on our toes as experts in the space. Thanks for the engaging discussion.
Right on. Thanks for the insights.